The unexpected and loved Pope of our time, Pope Francis, died at the age of 88. Bells rang across countries, flags were lowered, candles were lit, and tears flowed. Some things you haven't heard are the sad tributes, the secret messages from world leaders, and the emotional response from the successor that even shocked the Vatican. Stay with me, because you won't believe what happened after he died. Pope Francis did more than lead the church. He spoke out against injustice around the world, was a model of humility, and gave hope to those who were suffering. Now that news of his death at age 88 is spreading around the world, millions of people are sad. A lot of people are also asking more in-depth question. What was so special about this man? Why are honors coming from people who aren't religious, like politicians, famous people, and even people who don't like the church? This video tells the story of Pope Francis's last days, including the moving parts of his funeral service and how his replacement has already started to shape the future of the Catholic Church. You'll read about private letters that heads of state sent to the Vatican, how people around the world responded in surprising ways, and the touching parts of his funeral that made even the most experienced bishops cry. We'll also talk about how people around the world responded in waves, from the streets of Argentina to the gates of the Vatican City, and what the next steps are for the world's 1.3 billion Catholics. Watch out, because what took place behind closed doors might shock you. The beginning was so quiet that you won't believe it. Pope Francis had been dealing with a number of health issues for a long time, mainly with his lungs, knees, and stomach. Over the years, people saw him using a wheelchair more often, taking longer steps, and cutting down on his public visits. Even though these things went wrong, he never gave up on his goal to preach peace, help the poor, and challenge the church from the inside. The Vatican was much quieter in the last few weeks of his life. Close aides and high-ranking bishops said that meetings stopped all of a sudden. There were rumors going around about a secret hospitalization that no one knew about. The Holy See was very quiet this time, unlike the other times he had health concerns. According to people with ties to the Vatican, Pope Francis spent his last days praying alone or with just a few close friends and family. He allegedly asked for peace, not big events, not last-minute interviews, and not making the news. Francis stayed true to who he was until the very end, which is very different from how famous people usually die. Being humble, quiet, and very pious. But this is where it breaks my heart even more. As one of his last acts, he asked that personal, handwritten emails be sent to a few important people around the world. There were politicians, religious leaders, and even some of his harshest enemies among them. There are rumors that one of the letters sent to the new cardinal in Argentina just said, "Continue with mercy, not control." Most of these letters are kept secret. There is a lot of talk about this last word. Was it a hint at what he thought the church would turn into without him? Was he leaving a quiet message for the person who will take over after him? Now things start to get interesting. We were all shocked when we heard 48 hours later that he had died. It wasn't in a press release or through a global news service. It was announced by the soft chime of the Vatican bells and a single Latin phrase that echoed through the square. It's time for Paternoster to slow down. Our dad is now at peace. The world stopped all of a sudden. As the news spread around the world through the Vatican bells and other networks, a huge wave of sadness, shock, and thought hit the world. People came together to pray, be quiet, and sing everywhere he went, from his beloved hometown of Buenos Aires to the grand churches of Europe, from the busy markets of Nairobi to the quiet pews of Boston. It wasn't just Catholics who were sad, though. This was a moment for everyone to honor a man who had crossed faith lines. I'll tell you how everything went. As soon as the Vatican made its public announcement, world leaders started to speak out. The President of the United States, the leaders of the European Union, and many other heads of state paid respect to him. Pope Francis was called a spiritual lighthouse in a morally stormy sea by President Joe Biden, who was the second Catholic president of the United States. But this is the part that made many people cry. Thousands of people came together in the slums of Manila, Philippines, for an unplanned torch vigil. Kids knelt barefoot in front of makeshift altars and held pictures of Pope Francis that had been laminated in plastic to keep them dry in the rain. They weren't just sad about the Pope. They were sad about their leader, the person who stood up for the weak and fought the strong. They didn't just see him as a pope, They stopped what they were doing and the screen went dark for 10 seconds as an honor that had never been done before. One picture of Pope Francis happy was shown on public screens with the words, "Grazie Papa," written below it. Father, thank you. This is the part that gave many people who watched live chills. There were a lot of people in St. Peter's Square as night fell. Even though no one planned the event or called for the meeting, thousands of people showed up holding candles, rosaries, and handwritten notes in silence. The crowd went silent as a group began to sing Ave Maria in a soft voice. All of a sudden, as if by divine intervention, the clouds opened, but it didn't rain. A light snow started to fall. The light flakes sparkled for a moment in the square's golden lights, sitting softly on the shoulders of both tourists and priests, and there was a sense of something holy in the silence and snow. It looked like nature was bowing its head, but it wasn't a president, a famous person, or even a bishop who said the most shocking thing. It came from his replacement, who no one saw coming. In an emotional TV speech, Cardinal Pietro Albini, who was just chosen as Pope, showed up with red eyes and shaking hands. "I stand in the shadow of a giant" was the first simple line he wrote, but this is where it gets really interesting. During the event, he did not use it to celebrate his own position. He asked for 3 minutes of silence instead to honor Pope Francis. He took a step back, took off his zucchetto and skullcap, and prayed quietly while the video was rolling. Not a word was said. Millions of people around the world were shocked. It didn't matter what would happen to the church after that. Fights over power didn't matter. It did not matter what the politics, wealth, or past were. It was important to remember the life of a man who changed what it meant to be a compassionate leader in a world that doesn't usually award it. Things went off the rails just as it looked like the honors had reached their peak. A secret tape of a private last message from Pope Francis, whispered late at night just hours before he died, was found. It was recorded by his personal assistant. He said, "Tell them I loved them, choose mercy, and don't be afraid," in the shaky recording. In memorial songs, on candles, on banners, and all over churches, campuses, and countries, those lines can be heard. A last word that cut through politics and traditions and straight to the hearts of millions of people. Many people from all over the world sent messages, but not everyone was sad. Pope Francis was kind and humble, but he was also one of the most controversial popes in recent history. After he died, the arguments about what he left behind only got stronger. Allow me to explain. Pope Francis was always willing to question what was already happening. He broke rules and long-standing customs and was brave enough to ask the questions that many people in the church were afraid to ask. Some people thought this was brave leadership. Some people as deception. Take, for example, his unique view on the rights of LGBTQ+ people. Not long after becoming Pope in 2013, he said something that shook the church to its core. "If someone is gay and wants to find God and is good, who am I to judge them?" People said these words were new and said they were dangerous. There were a lot of Catholics around the world who saw this quote as a departure from theology. It was especially important for more conservative Catholics. For some, especially young Catholics and LGBTQ+ Catholics, it was the first time they felt like the Vatican saw them. But that was just the start. Pope Francis also spoke out against the church's wealth and power structures. He turned down the chance to live in the papal palace and instead chose a simple guest house. He got rid of extra church property and said that money should not be worshipped. Progressives praised his actions, but traditionalists and church leaders were against them because they thought they went against centuries of custom. But this is where things get tougher. A storm was building up behind the scenes. It was said that some powerful groups in the Vatican, especially the Roman Curia, did not like where Francis was leading the church. Talk of political maneuvering and strong opposition from within started to come to the surface. Anonymous letters got out. Hesitant interviews were given by retired bishops. At one point, a former Vatican ambassador went so far as to openly ask Pope Francis to step down. However, this is what shocks me. Francis is said to have told a close friend, "If I am crucified for standing with the people, so be it," even as he lay dying. That quote is now all over the internet, on protest signs, on memory walls, and on social media. There's also the matter of women in the church. Francis did not make women priests, but he did make it easier for women to lead than any other pope before him. He put women in important jobs at the Vatican. He even said that the diaconate for women might be looked at again, which many people saw as an attempt to change with the times. Francis stayed the course though. Additionally, he has dealt with abuse issues in the past. This could be the most controversial part of his job as pope. Francis did a lot to stop abuse by starting investigations, talking with survivors, and getting rid of predators. Not everyone agrees that it was enough. Some people say he did more than any other pope, but institutions kept getting in the way. In 2018, he faced public accountability when he was said to have ignored reports of abuse in Chile. At first he stood up for the accused bishop, but after a lot of criticism, he changed his mind, said sorry, and accepted the resignations of several Chilean bishops. For some, that showed how humble he was. Some people saw it as proof that he wasn't going fast enough. What does it all mean? In other words, Pope Francis leaves behind a complicated legacy that is praised in some cathedrals and questioned in others. But this part of the story makes it even more exciting. There are now two parts of the church. On one side are young Catholics who think Pope Francis saved the church from becoming irrelevant. On the other hand, traditionalists who think he watered down the philosophy in order to be nice. Even Pope Pietro V, who took over after Francis, is under a lot of pressure to either continue Francis's changes or undo them completely. And now, for the cliffhanger that everyone is still watching, inside the Vatican says that Francis left a sealed letter for his successor as Pope, but this has not been proven. What's inside, not sure, but there is a lot of talk about it. Some people say it's a sign, some say it's a message to finish what he began. Will the new Pope tell everyone about it, or will it stay hidden in a Vatican library, where many other secrets have been kept? Whatever happened, the death of Pope Francis has caused a lot of changes. It wasn't just a religious event when Pope Francis died. It was a worldwide event that seemed to stop time on several countries. From the time the Vatican made the official announcement that he had died, billions of people felt sad. Then, during the funeral, something happened that shocked even the most experienced fans. Let me tell you what made this goodbye different from all the others. First, there are a lot of people. More than 1.5 million people crowded into St. Peter's Square. People from the Philippines, Poland, Nigeria, and Argentina came as pilgrims. Every country with a Catholic heart. People held up flags and rosaries, and the event was shown on big screens in more than 40 languages. Some people had been camping outside the Vatican walls for days, holding pictures of Francis and wrapped in blankets. They didn't just cry for the Pope. They were for a man who had walked among them and healed their physical and spiritual wounds. One Argentinian woman cried as she held up a picture of France blessing her disabled son in 2015. She said, "He told me my child was holy. That was never said by anyone else." Then there was the parade. He asked that his coffin be made of simple cypress wood, and it was carried through the crowd in silence. No gold and no royal show, simple things. One last sign of the man who picked a guest house over a palace, and a worn-out cross over Nice clothes. But this is where things went very wrong. More people from over 190 countries than at any other papal funeral in history were present when the funeral mass started. There were kings, presidents, and religious leaders from groups that the Catholic Church used to be wary of. Sheikh Ahmed El Tayeb, the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, came from Egypt, which was a brave move, as she wiped her tears away. They put a white rose on the steps of the altar while standing next to a Buddhist monk from Kyoto. The monk was from Kyoto. There was no history of this. In sadness, they were all one. But the real shocker came when Pope Pietro I, the new pope, gave his sermon. With the whole world watching, he said something that went viral right away. Frank didn't worry about change. It scared him to stay quiet when wrong was done. Many saw the line as a direct challenge to the more traditional parts of the church. They saw it as a sign that Pietro might follow Francis's lead, which would have been brave, especially on such an important day. Then something completely out of the blue happened. It was a moment of silence as the coffin was lowered into the tomb under St. Peter's Basilica, which is where popes from many years ago are buried. The Vatican choir stopped singing. Then, a small group of children who had fled war-torn countries like Syria, Sudan, and Ukraine began to sing in Latin and their own languages. Francis had personally asked them to come months before he died. In his last words, he asked that the voices of those who are forgotten be heard at his funeral. People cried. People saw even the most tough church leaders with their heads bowed and their eyes red. But now comes the part that no one saw coming. In the very last moment of the event, a Vatican official took the stage and said something. The next day, something that had been kept secret and shut off would be made public. People in the crowd gasped. This wasn't just a talk about God. Sources inside the Vatican say that this letter is a message, a warning in directions to everyone in the world. One that Francis thought should not be read until after he died. Everyone is now holding their breath. Some say it might have his last thoughts on how to change the church. Some people think it could be a confession, or a sign about how unstable politics will be in the future. Online, conspiracy ideas are already going around. Francis's letter has been popular for days, and there is a lot of talk about it on YouTube. We do know this though, the letter is real. It was written in the last few weeks of his life, and it might have secrets that will rock the church and maybe even the whole world. What will happen next? After he left, what